Well, this should be an interesting commentary. Welcome, everybody, to the BrainScratch Commentaries playthrough of Final Fantasy VII Remake. Um, it's actually been so long since I recorded that I forget whether or not I skipped over logos or if it just really does cut to the title. I probably...
No, we need to learn about everything. Preferences about camera, difficulty, whether you're playing this off PS Classic or Pro, all that stuff.
Yeah, well, this part's 48 minutes long, so I decided to save a couple seconds at the beginning by skipping over the developer logos. I'm sorry. Square Enix did develop this. It's not a Hong Kong bootleg or something. Oh, it would be a pretty bootleg if it were. I'm just gonna put that out there because goddamn, they're still good at this CGI thing.
Man, you know what? They're so good at CGI. They should just make a whole CGI Final Fantasy movie. Like they're just so good at it. How could that ever go wrong?
Let's make two while they're at it.
I know, right? Yeah, it'll go great.
This first one's gonna have Alec Baldwin, Steve Buscemi.
While they are good at the CGI cityscape, I will say they did, ironically, not do so well on the character models because, like, you know...
Oh, you mean the Sonic 06 character townspeople?
No,
Are you talking about
that's not
in
what I mean.
Spirits
I
Within?
mean CGI people. Like, okay, you play this whole game in real time with Cloud and friends looking all amazing, and then the ending happens and it's all CGI, and it's like suddenly everyone's face is made of plastic. What the hell happened?
Guess it just wasn't perfect yet.
It's like we've gotten to the point where the in-game...
It's a side effects of the ether.
We've gotten to the point where the in-game character models are legitimately more impressive than the CGI ones. It's mind-blowing how far we've come.
Not so back in 1997.
Hey, Popeye Cloud is still a treasure. All right.
I still like the Popeye models. I'm not gonna give them too much shit.
In a hokey, look how stupid the graphics were back then that we thought
It
were
was
impressive,
1997.
So.
It was their first RPG on the PlayStation.
So I'm not going to hold it against them too much, but it is one of those. It's kind of stupid looking.
Yeah, not gonna lie, I don't really like it. I put up with it because the rest of the game is so awesome, but...
It was clearly a holdover from their
The N64 development.
previous days of having deformed characters because, you know, they immediately drop those Popeye models when they go to battle and all that and CGI. It's like, okay.
I think it has more to do with the very early game being developed on the N64.
It's very likely.
But, you know, for the sake of consistency, they also did CGI FMVs in that game where they did use the Popeye models, and it was really weird.
Oh,
Yeah.
I love that though, where Cloud's going off a cliff in a wheelchair and he's like,
Man, I don't go fuck.
We all meet the Reaper in the end.
And then they have, like, multiple different versions of some of the CGI models when they don't use the super deformed version. Like, there's a version of Sephiroth that has perfectly modeled hair, and then there's a version of Sephiroth that has hair tentacles. And it's like, these were clearly made at different stages in development.
And I like how the final boss is nothing but a black void, so they could have a higher poly Cloud and Sephiroth fight.
In any case, the beautiful, beautiful classic intro that zooms out.
It's hard not to geek out at this if you're a 90s kid.
I'm still enamored by it. Like, not just the idea that this actually became a reality after so many goddamn years of teasing.
I mean, I remember the 2006 PS3
tech
demo.
Yeah, the tech demo.
I do
Thankfully,
not
wasn't the
remember
basis for because
this.
that was
What
based off of that. That was based. That was no. It was just the opening of 7 like
yeah,
this.
it was just a CG movie of the opening of 7 to show how powerful the PS3 was.
Yeah.
And everyone at the time thought, oh, they're remaking Final Fantasy VII. It's like, no, it's just a tech demo, and everyone went, aw.
Nobody knows. No, you don't dare open with tech demos of valued properties that people would love to see a remake for. You just don't do that. Like, if everybody, if
Well,
I don't know, if they did a tech, if Nintendo did a tech demo of the next console with a recreation of, say, I know it's a rare property like Banjo-Kazooie, everyone's gonna say, oh, they're remaking Banjo. Like, no, it's just a tech demo. No, they're remaking Banjo. No, it's just a tech demo.
Then why'd you make it if you're not remaking the game?
Well, to be fair on that point, though, it was that tech demo that sparked talk of a Final Fantasy VII Remake in the first place. If they hadn't done that, we might not have this.
And knowing Nomura, it did indeed take 14 years to make happen.
Because I think, honest to God, they just made it as a tech demo, and I expected everyone, oh, it's gonna be a 7 remake. It was like, no. But then, all right, people really want this. So I think starting from then, it's like, okay, we got to remake this game.
Right.
They also, Nomura also stated that he felt pressure to do it now because all the original development staff was getting up there in age. So it was now or never.
Yeah, kind of was, wasn't it? It's a good thing.
Hello there, Cloud. Off to save the world today, I see.
It's a good thing that they did it while they had those staff available to work with, because I think this would have been a very different product if they hadn't had such close intimacy with the original project in the writing and creative process.
Also, having people on board who have experience telling Nomura, "Stop! You're getting a little too crazy."
I think that was the big fear for folks. Well, me specifically, I can't speak for everybody, but this was a remake of Final Fantasy VII post compilation, and the compilation is very hit and miss, just in terms of quality games, story, all that, and you know that if they were going to remake 7 afterwards, they would be taking a lot of beats from those games, and I was wondering, oh boy, like how much?
My big fear was ever since 10/10-2 came out, Nomura's had this huge hard-on with basically wanting to make Devil May Cry with Final Fantasy in some regard, whether it's Kingdom Hearts, turning 15
Okay, well, to be
into
fair
a
to
different
Nomura,
thing.
Nomura was still strictly character designer.
Yeah,
I think,
I-
with 10/10-2.
Yes, but ever since he was kind of been put like fully in charge, that's been more his development design philosophy. And it's like, okay, it's not necessarily bad, but when you're remaking something like 7, that's not A, what people want, and B, you haven't exactly been very good at it.
Yeah,
So, and you know what? And so coming into this game, I was extremely worried and to an extent pessimistic. But I'll give them credit where
we get
credit's
always
due.
like that, right?
Well, yes, but you know what I mean. So
Anyway.
there was a lot of reason to go into this game really kind of scared in a lot of regards. So
one thing that I've
to
never
their
played-
credit, sorry, just finishing
Yeah.
my last thought. Just to their credit, you know what? They did it. They did a really good job that mixed both action and the RPG stuff.
So one thing to give them credit for is that I think Final Fantasy, some of the more modern Final Fantasies have a reputation of being kind of slow to start and kind of like it takes a while to get to the good part. The famous thing a lot of people said about Final Fantasy 13 is, oh, it's a great game 40 hours in, was one of the common memes. I'm actually surprised at how quick we get to real gameplay in this.
Well, it helps that 7 starts with gameplay basically after
Well,
the little intro.
ironically, 13 tried to have Final Fantasy VII's introduction. It didn't take long to start. It took long to get to the open world. Because, after their big, fast, in media res opening, and then, narratively, it's all action after that. So it should be a fast-paced game, right? But you go through 3 chapters before you can start leveling up, because you go through 3 chapters before you become a L'Cie. You go through...
You can't cast any magic, you can't do basically anything in that game until, 3 or 4 hours in.
And then the game becomes, it's always called a hallway. And that's accurate. It is a long, twisty hallway because there is nothing to break up the pace of the game. There are no towns. There's no downtime. It's all just you're running through a straight hallway fighting random monsters, and that's all you do. It's like, wow, if you really wanted to make an RPG that sounds like everyone's argument against turn-based RPGs, you do Final Fantasy XIII's design philosophy, because there's nothing else there. You just fight and level up and go on to the next dungeon and repeat. That was 13 in a nutshell. And while I feel like I'm one of the more forgiving ones toward 13's design, because
I'm not.
I enjoy the combat and I enjoy some of the characters enough to want to play it every now and then get 10 hours in and remember why I don't often go back to it and then
I
drop
love
it
games
again.
like that.
It's that kind of experience for me, but it's not good. And although 13.2 and Lightning Returns did fix a lot of that stuff. It also came with an exponentially dumber storyline, so...
Don't you love Valkyrie Lightning?
Well,
He was just there.
Valkyrie Lightning,
too.
I like, you know what, that concept I could deal with if the rest of the story attached to it wasn't so silly.
I want to say it wasn't until 15 where Nomura was placed in charge of a Final Fantasy, like, directly.
Yeah.
Because he was in charge of Versus 13. We all, like, know where that went. And how that might have
10
been...
years of development hell.
that might have been the catalyst for how Kingdom Hearts 3 ended up turning out where it's going. But by that time, he was already, like, a few games deep in Kingdom Hearts.
Yeah.
He was given 15, I believe, and...
Well, he was given 15 until it was taking way too long, too expensive, and he just wasn't finishing it. So Square was like, "Okay, we're releasing the game."
So looking at least at Wikipedia, it says the only game in the Final Fantasy series that he directed was this game, the remake.
Oh, yeah, well, that's as a director.
There are different leadership roles.
Yeah, producer and director have, different
So when people say, "Oh, he only directed this game," it's like, no, he was a very important guy in most things post 10.
Oh yes, of course, but
So that's why when people say Nomura's in charge of Final Fantasy, because he's the only stable thing between all those games.
I would give him a little more fight, though, because I would think that after 10, he was more in Kingdom Hearts than he was in Final Fantasy.
yeah, he did a lot of work on Kingdom Hearts.
Compilation stuff, too, no doubt. But I wouldn't say, like, mainline Final Fantasy.
Kingdom Hearts is clearly his baby because
Yes, it is.
he's the director of every single game aside from like maybe.
He's also
a mobile
just a
one.
straight up creator.
After
but, yeah.
10-2, what was our mainline Final Fantasies? A couple...
Well, we had 11, which is an MMO, 12, which is a single-player MMO, 13, another
no.
MMO, and then 15.
I hate when people call 12 a single-player MMO. Do you know where that gameplay originated? Single-player RPGs, god damn it. It's
Well, okay, I will say though, to play devil's advocate here, there are a lot of games where the term single-player MMO I think is fitting because just the way the game plays is just feels more like an MMO.
You mean
I've heard a lot of people
like
consider
Knights of the Old
Xenoblade.
Republic, for example? Or
I have not
Dragon
played a lot.
Age? Or
Xenoblade is
Baldur's
the one I've heard
Gates?
the most.
Icewind Dale? Neverwinter Nights? No?
You're the only one who's played any of those, Lewis.
We're all weebs here, Lewis. We don't understand these Western games.
Yeah, well, that was the thing. Final Fantasy XII was part of that wave of JRPGs that was adopting Western RPG design philosophy. But of course, since people don't play Western RPGs in the West for some reason, everyone points to World of Warcraft or something.
Even though World of Warcraft is a Western RPG.
Yeah.
When are we gonna have the RuneScape commentary?
Have we been able to open that back room in the first town that has all the gold in it yet?
Yeah, so Ryan, what you need to do in order to get that
No, I'm
open,
not taking off all my
you
gear
have
and
to take off
equipment
all
to do
your
this.
gear and drop it on the ground, okay?
No.
And then you hit Alt F4, okay, and then you get in the secret room.
Okay.
So many kids.
So, I should probably actually talk about the gameplay we're watching here, although we've got plenty of minutes left to do that. This combat system is aces. They finally knocked it out of the ballpark in terms of marrying an action focus to the kind of party-based tactical RPG stuff Final Fantasy is best known for. Finally, after how many attempts they got it?
A lot.
It's kind of magical though, because I was just talking about Western RPG influences, and the stuff that this combat system gets right is mostly adapted from what you would see in a BioWare game, Mass Effect in particular, where you have two companions and you have a targeting system that you can use while tactically paused to give out commands to both of your party members. But
it's a lot more snappy though, I feel.
well, yeah, they also take it one step further and let you control the other party members, which was something they flirted with in Final Fantasy XV via DLC, but it was kind of awful there because, well, you either played as Noctis or you played as someone else. There wasn't really a reason to switch between in the middle of a fight.
Okay, so I have not played this version of the game. I have played the original. what?
It's pretty much the same thing.
Well, I mean, except that you're missing half of it. When it comes to the combat, when you hit the attack buttons to do your melee attacks, are there like combos? Can you go like light, strong, light, and do stuff like that, or is it just like a set string?
It's just a set string, but Cloud has a special mode that if you hit triangle goes into a more offensive but low mobility
Yes.
attack pattern.
Yes, Cloud's every character in this game has specifically two gimmicks. They have their abilities that they can use with the ATB bar, which the AI will never use unless you give them a command, and then they have special abilities that they can only use when you're in direct control of them. Cloud's is Punisher mode. He can switch from his regular hack and slash, run and swing operator mode to Punisher mode, which is slow, heavy hitting, and replaces his block with a counter stance of all things, which is really fun to use. Basically, if you go into the counter stance before an enemy's attack lands, he'll block the attack and hit with a big ass heavy swing that also increases his ATB and the stagger bar by quite a bit.
It's great for humans.
It's great for humans.
Yes.
Also, it's good for a lot of things, but it's harder to use on non-humans because they're just harder to read, honestly. But you can use his counter against, almost everything in the game, really. I think I've pulled it off against Sephiroth, which was satisfying. I'm not sure if I did that.
Wait, they
during
have
this
you fight
recording, though.
Sephiroth this early?
Oh, they weren't gonna hold. They weren't gonna hold.
Oh,
Sephiroth
yeah,
out of this game
I
as
guess
a
I should
fight.
get this out of the way. Although most of the game is just a fleshed-out remake of the original story, Final Fantasy VII Remake pulls a bit of a meta thing toward the end and becomes more of a...
Which is genius in a lot of ways. Unfortunately, it comes at the cost of Nomura Kingdom Hearts bullshit at points.
Well, yes.
I've heard about what it is and what it implies, and it does indeed seem somewhat Kingdom Hearts BS.
Well, we say Kingdom Hearts BS because we're used to Nomura, but like, you know what else that could be compared to? You know, pissing off the fans in favor of doing meta stuff that people are going to find interesting down the line. Metal Gear Solid.
Star Wars?
No, not Star Wars. Metal Gear Solid. When has...
Oh, the Sons of... Would you say Seven Remake is the Sons of the Liberty?
No.
Final Fantasy?
It's not half that genius, but...
I think my favorite part of the whole plot twisty stuff of this is I remember like the day this came out, someone posted just a fan art thing of this Cloud and then Chibi Popeye Arms Cloud at the train station, and it says time to save the world again, buddy. And then like a few days later, someone posted, "You have no idea."
Oh man. But anyway, this we're not going to see any of that meta change-up stuff in this part because the first bombing run mission, which was the demo, is the most like true to the original part of the game by far.
Well, it's the most exciting part of the Midgar section.
It's also the very beginning of the game, and I feel like since that's the part that people played the most and the most people saw, it's also the most important thing to get right.
Yeah, you got to grab them early,
And
whether they're
an
a veteran
RPG
or a
with a
newbie.
bad opening is not. It's
Terrible.
It can be very, very rough. It's the main reason why a lot of people had issues with Pokemon Sun and Moon. Dragon Quest VII's opening takes legitimately 3 hours to get to the first fight, and
Insert any Atlas game here.
well, no, not any Atlas game. That's more of a Persona problem than
Oh
most of the other
Nocturne
ones.
just has a short opening sequence and then it drops you in the apocalypse and you're off.
Hi, Nibelheim. We won't see you until 3 or 4 years from now.
It's interesting that they have a
Maybe.
fully modeled town square for Nibelheim in a game that doesn't have Nibelheim in it.
Which is why I'm thinking that the wait time for the other games is not going to be as long because they already got a lot of assets.
I mean, I would somewhat kind of think that, but they also already announced Final Fantasy 16, so
Which is led by a different team, though.
It's entirely different team, and Yoshi P said that they started that like 3 or 4 years.
Yeah, that's
Yeah.
Yoshi P. He's the MMO guy.
I can't wait. A single player MMO, you might say.
It seems like every time the franchise goes back
Hey,
to its
it's
fantasy
Bender.
roots, yeah, it's pulling on its MMO stuff. To be fair, Final Fantasy XIV has been knocking it out of the park these last few expansions. So,
Yep.
You see,
Yoshi
Final
P has earned
Fantasy
our
is
trust.
Final Fantasy is a series you can always rely on to get it right the second time.
well, yeah.
Todd the 13th.
In some case, you know what? In some aspects, Final Fantasy VII Remake can even be said to do that, because there are problems that fans of the original will have. But one thing that I will fight to the death on is the combat system. More specifically, the fact that the original game's combat system was too easy for the number of options it gave you, and the fact that this game's combat system heavily encourages you to use all of the options it gives you.
Yeah, seven on the base game is a little too easy in most regards.
Yeah.
I mean, it's about as hard as most of the other Final Fantasy games. Given if you cut out the first 3 where they're getting their bearing, and 5, which is the weird one, most of the games aren't really that hard.
Well, yeah,
I'd say 6 is harder unless you're going for everyone.
No. 6 is a brain dead easy game
Compared to what?
compared to most other RPGs.
6 kind of did encourage you to use your options early on, but then you get the Espers and just teach everyone magic, and
Yeah, what options? Edgar auto crossbow?
well, you only know that if you read the fucking game, and
chainsaw.
you only know that off the bat if you read the guide and it told you ahead of time Edgar's auto chainsaw is the best, and you know where to get it, and you got it, and now you're gone. But that's only for the portions of the game where Edgar is with you.
Yeah, and by the time he leaves, you've got a million different magic things.
Well, that's why I say 6 can be hard if you're going for the bare minimum of character.
If you're going for the bare minimum, yeah. Like if you are like to the point in the World of Ruin section, then yeah, 6 can be pretty challenging.
Yeah, but that's if you're making it challenging on your own merits. If you're playing the game
On
as
that, I would
intended.
agree as well.
But 6 also didn't give you quite so many options as Final Fantasy VII did. 7 had this big, robust, new customization system, and then a third of the way through, you're just okay. Every time you're injured, cure all. Every time you fight a sweeper,
I would
balls.
argue they're similar for different reasons. 7 was based on the materia system, yes, and that was very customizable. 6 had the virtue of having so many fucking characters, though, and that covered a lot of bases.
I felt I was doing a similar amount of menu fiddle-faddling in between fights in both games. It's just like, okay, I finished getting all of the skills of this, what are they called, Eidolons? And so you move them all around and you make sure everybody's got it. Okay, I finished all the skills on this materia, you swap them all around.
There's another aspect to the Esper system in 6 that you really didn't need to use, though, and that's like depending on what magicite a character has equipped when they level up. They get additional stats based on which one they have. So
which you never needed, not even in the
yeah, it's the Final Fantasy equivalent of EVs in Pokemon.
Yeah.
You don't need to know any of that crap.
It's even more useless than EVs in Pokemon because there's no competitive elements, so min-maxing is not something you need.
That's why I mentioned the advancing.
What, you don't play competitive Final Fantasy VIII with your with your friend while the Charlie's
competitive
Angels
Final
try to save the
Fantasy
world?
VIII would just be 3 parties with the exact same stats, all max numbers in everything, and the same spell list. Okay.
No. I think it's one of the Charlie's Angels movies from the 2000s. 2 people at one point are playing multiplayer on a PlayStation, and they just have I think it's Final Fantasy VIII on the TV because they clearly didn't know what video games were, and they're just like, fuck it, put a popular game on the TV, but that doesn't have multiplayer. No, just put a game on the TV. We don't have time for this.
What were they doing? Playing pass and play Final Fantasy VIII? Okay.
No, they were both playing at the same time. But they had Final Fantasy on the TV for
you love how
reason.
TV shows even to the mid 2000s would still do Atari bleeps and bloops whenever they were trying to convey people were playing video games.
You know what? That would have worked if they had picked Final Fantasy VI or Final Fantasy IX, because those actually do have multiplayers. Anyway, in this section, if you run into the lasers like a dumbass over and over, Jesse has so many lines for that. It's funny. It's great. It's amazing.
Do they wonder why they hired this incompetent asshole?
Yes. It gets to that point where Jesse's starting to really seriously question your competence.
Ron, you're the kind of guy that keeps touching something even if it's clearly labeled "Do not touch."
Anyway, this last one, which looks really intimidating, is the easiest one to remember. The laser switches on exactly 7 times before it shuts off.
They're all patterns.
Well, yeah, but the last one is the easiest to remember because 7, okay? It's the number of the game.
Oh, okay. And then by the end of it, it says remake in the laser formation.
It says remake in Morse code.
When I was
Yeah.
playing the demo, I played through it like 3 times in one day. This motherfucker was the most satisfying milestone to reach because he seems to take so much time. He seems to be so bullet spongy, so damage spongy. The first time you fight him when you have no idea what you're doing with the combat, the moment you get into that groove of character switching and giving commands and using everyone's special abilities to their fullest, this guy takes no time at all. And it's probably the most genius part of this first mission is throwing the sweeper at you and making this the part where you have to start to really get the combat, otherwise things are going to take forever. Because you have to fight another one of these fuckers. Thanks for giving me the tutorial, like, literally the instant I've already done it.
Cloud was fighting for his life.
No, he gives me, that's the tutorial on what to do when your character is pinned. It gave me the tutorial after I cast the spell that freed Cloud. So it's like, yeah, I'm already one step ahead of you, because I'm just that awesome, man. Cool guys don't look at lightning bolts.
Notice, this is something that's not going to be followed up for probably like another 16 parts. But notice how that sweeper exploded. You didn't take any damage. just put that in the back folder for now. Just save it for later.
Maybe in another session or two.
Maybe another part. Yeah.
No, it's Final Fantasy VII Remake, so that's not going to come up for another 8 parts, 16 parts.
Fine. But I agree that using the sweeper to introduce the importance of staggering enemies and applying pressure to them, also that you can kill it really fast, and then watching it go out in a blaze of glory is a very satisfying way of implementing gameplay mechanics.
Yeah, and you know, it also extends to the boss fights, because when you first boot up that demo and you fought Guard Scorpion, it took for fucking ever. It seemed to have so much goddamn health. Oh my god, are we in Final Fantasy XII territory now? No, it doesn't take all that long at all when you're using the combat system correctly. So you really do need to get a grip on at least the basic things that you need to do to make this combat system work. Otherwise, you're going to have a bad time. So, in that sense, I appreciate that they made the game challenging. Like, on a technical level. It's not super-de-duper hard. Like, it's no Devil May Cry, Dante Must Die, a bullshit challenge. What it is challenging enough that you can't shut your brain off while you're playing. That's essentially all it is. On hard mode, I don't like hard mode.
Hard mode requires you to kind of specialize your layouts specifically to handle whatever the situation is coming, so it relies way too much on knowing what's coming.
The problem I have with hard mode is that it shuts off items, and it feels
you're not allowed to use items at all.
Yeah, and you know,
not outside of battle.
And you know, there are already battles you're not allowed to use items in. They're the VR battles against the summons and stuff. Like, that makes sense. You're in VR, you don't have access to your physical real-world inventory. It's a nice situational challenge for 1 or 2 battles. But when you turn off items for the entire game, suddenly you realize, hey, you know what? They did items so well in this game that items are kind of an integral part of what makes the combat system interesting and tactical. When you take them away, you're just taking away a layer of tactics. So,
are you saying I actually have to use my fire bombs and other crap that I normally just ignore?
Well, not so much that. It's more so health and MP.
They have all of those items in here, but they're marginally more useful than they used to be. But I never.
It's hard to be more useless though.
I never bothered to use them either way.
Yeah,
so
the only items I ever tended to use in this game or most other Final Fantasies, again, aside from the first 3, which are really their own kind of bag of worms. The only items I ever used were I would buy 99 normal potions because they're dirt cheap and use those in the middle of a dungeon in order to heal. Because I don't want to use up all the MP I've got, because what if I need to use my 76 ethers for something else?
I never really did that because, you see, I only ever used defensive magic with Aerith and Vincent because they're the best at it. So I just had all the other characters in my party be the healing bitches. So It's kind of like in Persona 5 where I keep Morgana on the reserve lists for the entire dungeon and just have him do all the healing.
Oh, I love having heal bitch in the party. Is you know what? It's honest work.
Like battles take longer, but at least you're safe.
You just see Barrett turn to the camera and go, "It's a living."
Every party needs a cleric. Nobody wanted to play it in second edition though. Yeah.
You know, you just see Kate Sith sitting behind the team, and it's just like, you know, guys, I can help. There's room for another. Why do we only need?
Just sit there and roll your dice, Kate Sith.
Heal us, Kate Sith. Okay, fine.
Why doesn't anybody have any fucking time to gamble now? Christ.
What? It's a very damaging attack.
In Final Fantasy VII, you didn't even leave him in the back row. You left him in the airship with Yuffie. Poor Yuffie. She's airsick, and you always leave her on the airship.
I used Kate Sith a lot in my playthrough of the game because I liked him. He limit breaks like every 3 seconds.
So what? You just had Reeve listening on the intercom to Yuffie's whining the entire time.
That's his
listen,
punishment.
I understand that he's a better character, but Sid just felt really redundant to me because you have to have Cloud in your party all the time.
Sid
and he's
is.
already invisible.
I have no idea
powerhouse.
why people like using Sid. He's just a constant reminder that they don't have an actual Dragoon in the game. So, yeah.
So it's just like, okay, sure, I'll keep the stupid cat.
That
Sure.
said, I am legitimately excited to see what they do with Yuffie, Kate Sith, and Sid in this game. Because, okay, they already have...
Also, how they're going to make Vincent mandatory, because you know they're not going to make him
I do
optional.
want to comment on that one moment that we just passed there, because that is like legit one of my favorite exchanges of Barrett and Cloud. There is when Cloud has to be remarked because he has to be that person, but Barrett immediately snaps back, "Oh, I did the damn job," and then Cloud has like no response for that, and Barrett takes so much pride in that.
The characters are great because they're how they should be from 7.
Well, okay, how they should be. It's interesting what they did here because it's entirely a product of pacing. In the original game, we got a very basic idea of who these characters are. And, you know, we've had years and years to fill in those blanks.
It's expanded upon obviously because we have voice acting.
Oh yes, I know.
Cutscenes and all.
But here's the thing: I never liked Barrett at all, and it's not just because the translators decided to make him Mr. T. I just thought he was boring. In this
Barrett is so good in this game.
In this game, he's got so much to him. He's great. He's amazing. I love Barrett now. So
I would have just as an aside thing, I would have really liked it if in this fight, since Cloud's the soldier, if Barrett chimes like, you know what this thing is like. Surely there has to be some kind of trick, right? Like attack when his tail is up and ready to strike, and Cloud goes, "You couldn't have gotten it more wrong."
Listen. Even in the PC re-release, they still say that, and it's like, okay, the tail's up. Why am I not doing damage to this stupid
You fell
thing?
for the dude.
And
trap.
that's the revised translation that actually fixes some of the grammar errors, but
Yeah, that guy aren't sick anymore. You know, so why is
at the very least we don't call Barrett an R word on the stairs climb anymore.
we got that at least? Yeah.
man, you know, people always talk about the famous lines in the Final Fantasy VII translation. They never talk about the lines of dialogue that were just grammatically gimped so that they had barely any meaning anymore.
Oh, that's a common thing in mid-2000s.
Mid-2000s, late 90s.
Late mid-90s. Well, I mean, some games even into the 2000s were badly translated, but mid-90s PlayStation translations were not very
Translating from Japanese to English is a pain in the ass process because of the way Japanese uses pronouns, or more specifically, doesn't use pronouns a lot of the time, because the Japanese, they only actually use pronouns when the situation is so unclear that context doesn't tell you what the pronoun should be anyway. So what they would say something like is feeling bad rather than he is feeling bad. You know, if there's only one person that you could be talking about, so you don't bother to specify. That's the kind of thing that happens in Japanese. So you get stuff like in translations, they're translating in a really lazy way, so you don't necessarily know who they're talking about when you're just reading the dialogue off a spreadsheet. So, but they decided to translate without that context anyway, so you get the pronoun completely wrong.
Yeah, there's also the issue of space limitations as well, and how much text they want.
That was more so back in the cartridge days.
Well,
it
was. There is also programming aspects to it because, especially in games where they like had the text box appear over someone's head. They wanted to use a similar amount of text box so they didn't have to add in more code to bring up more text boxes.
That's specifically why Sakaguchi and team did text boxes the way they did for 9. Specifically so it'd be easier to edit text as they went along.
Yeah, here's the thing about that, though. The reason that they used to do that, especially on the SNES and NES, is because they couldn't very easily alter the sizes of the text boxes. This is okay. This is only really relevant to most of us if we try to get into hex editing to mod old SNES games, but you need to seriously alter the game code in order to expand the amount of text box size you have, if that's what your translation mod calls for. And as far as I know, the only like easy tool for doing that is for Final Fantasy VI.
Yeah, there were a lot of elements at play that made the era just not great for translations. So it goes to show that
Ted
when
Weasley did the best he could.
Like, when even Pokemon Red and Blue have some of the least stilted translations of that era, it's saying something about it.
I like shorts. They're comfy and easy to wear.
I went back to play Final Fantasy Legend 3 recently, and oh god, that dialogue physically hurts me because of the way they translate it.
It's not really an RPG, but if you ever play the first Gargoyles Quest game, which I should record for the channel at some point, the translation is so bad, it is one of the funniest things I've ever seen in my entire life at points.
Now, it's kind of unfortunate that I like Barrett in this game so much, because we don't actually get to play as him all that much. If you remember in the original game, Barrett was really only available toward the end of the Midgar section, and toward the beginning of
up
the
until
Midgar
Sector
section.
5, yeah, then it's Cloud and Aerith, and then...
I hope in the sequel they make him a little bit more interesting, because of the 4 you directly play as in this game, he's easily the least interesting.
Well, he's guy with guns, so his combat inherently feels a little bit less
he's a
interesting.
tank.
He's a long-range tank.
Yeah.
He's not just good at... I think he has the most HP out of every character.
Yep.
He also has a lot of defensive perks.
Here's the thing. You know, I really like his playstyle, actually, because you can do interesting things with his ATB bar and his overcharge. And he does have melee weapons, just like in the originals, but he doesn't get them until pretty late in the game. So...
Yeah, and I don't like the melee weapons in this game because they make him horrifically slow.
Oh yeah, his movement speed really needs help. But it's weird. Like, in battle, he slows down because he can keep up with you on the field just fine. But he slows down in battle. Why?
Well, it's almost like he's not carrying the 50-pound sword, and so he can run a little bit faster than Cloud does.
But why does he slow down in battle while Cloud can do all this flippy?
No, you know what? In games that have variable speed between combat situations and non-combat situations, like say the Silent Hill Downpour and the like, usually your character speeds up in battle. Why does he slow down?
He's an old man. He's
not old. He's like what, 30?
He's too old for this shit.
But you know,
I mean, I am 30 and I feel too old for this shit.
But you know,
so.
I feel like the amount of time you get to use Barrett in this game is a little unproductive to encouraging people to learn to use his mechanics. I did because I wanted to show him off, but that was a deliberate effort on my part.
Well, there's what, 4 playable characters in this game?
Yes.
Cloud, Yuffie, not Yuffie.
Yuffie.
Cloud, Aeris, Tifa, and Barrett.
Yeah.
So, yeah, there's ultimately not that many characters to learn to in depth in this one, I guess. And just due to the way that the beginning section is structured, you're pretty much forced to play a lot of this as Cloud, I would have to imagine.
Yeah, well, for most of the first half of the game, what you have is Cloud, Tifa, and Aerith. Barrett is there for the opening mission and for the second bombing mission. And the first battle that really gives you real incentive to learn how to use him is also the boss battle right before you lose him. So, it's a little... yeah. So then when you get Barrett back for Shinra Tower, you might like be so used to playing as Cloud and Tifa that you sort of neglect learning how to use Barrett, and that's gonna bite you in the butt because there's another boss battle where it's important to know how to use him. Less important than Airbuster though, because you also have Aerith for that one.
Airbuster's so good though, but we'll get to that.
Oh yeah, that boss fight is awesome.
You hear that? Damn thing isn't how it's done.
The scorpion was what accidentally activated the bomb this time.
We have set them up the bomb. Yes.
They show they show a lot of details about what's going on that it makes sense to show in this particular kind of narrative style. It's okay in a game like Final Fantasy VII in the 90s, where everyone's a bobblehead and everyone zips from area to area like a 16-bit ass RPG. To
characters going inside one another because
to skate over little details like what people are doing at a particular point in time. But when you're doing a live action story like this, suddenly all those little details become a lot more important for getting the scene correct, you know. So
like, what are Jesse, Biggs, and Wedge doing? Just hanging out?
So stuff like where the scorpion came from, or how Barrett reacted to Cloud suddenly being, oh wait, something's coming, or why the fuck the bomb just started the moment the boss battle ended.
I don't know why it's that big of a question. The scorpion thing came from the giant whoosh that came from walking.
It's like, yeah.
Look out, Cloud. It's the dreaded whoosh.
Stuff like that is fine in a low detail game. When a game is low...
Beware the random battles.
Yeah, when a game is low detail, the lack of detail just gives the brain more information to fill in on its own. The abstraction is fine. And when a game is high detail, suddenly that stuff feels like it should be filled in on its own more. So it's interesting to compare the way Remake tells the story to the way the original game tells the story.
Hey, we'll link up over there.
Does Jessie spend the entire game flirting with Cloud?
Yes.
Yes and no.
Okay.
Yes and no. She has a very interesting story in this game. She's okay. Because
the only thing that was distracting about her for me was because her VA is
Futaba
in Persona 5, and she slips into Futaba a few times.
Yeah.
Oh, I can hear it. I haven't even played. Wait, you obtained a Moogle model? What?
A Moogle medal. That's a currency for
yeah.
Oh, medal. I thought it said model. It's like what Cloud collects this crap.
Oh, yes.
Is it limited edition? Can I sell it for money?
Well, it is limited edition, yes, but the Moogle medals are something you exchange with a certain NPC in Sector 5
later.
that you can get certain items and stuff from. Some of them are actually stuff that you'll really want, so it's a good idea to collect as many Moogle medals as you can. Unfortunately, most of the Moogle medals that don't come from side quests are just random drops from breakable objects. So you need to so it's complete luck how many...
Or you just spam the minigames.
Well, you can spam the minigames to farm them after you get to the NPC, but it's complete luck how many you'll have when you get to them. They let you start collecting Moogle medals from the very beginning of the game, though, thankfully, so you might have enough to get a couple of items from him when you first encounter him.
Soldier boy.
I remember when I found the first Moogle medal a couple of times in like some trash bins, like, oh, this is gonna be those fucking bobbleheads from RE2 remake. And RE3, it's like, oh god.
No, fortunately, there are no specific Moogle medals that you need to find for completion. Because, well, you only need so many Moogle medals to get all of the items that the guy has. And then after that, it's all just consumable items that you can collect infinitely with however many Moogle medals you have left. But...
Yeah, this is the part where the game says, I hope you learn the battle system.
Well, you still have plenty of goddamn time, even if you set it to 20 minutes like I do. So...
Yeah, but it's actually, if you don't know what you're doing, it actually can be kind of tight now.
What does setting the time limit do?
Just alter some cutscenes. There's no... Well, you know what? It might affect Barrett's affinity ranking with Cloud. Because there is still that. That is still here. There's Cloud, there's Tifa, and there's Barrett. And there will probably be Yuffie once she's introduced. For this part, specifically, it really only affects certain scenes. It affects... specifically, a scene you get before you go into the Shinra Tower, which determines which character shows up in that scene, and it affects what characters show up and in what order during the final boss fight to join you for that.
The affection value is overall.
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay.
You can get Barrett during the final boss scene if you want, but
it's really hard.
It's hard to do because, as usual, he's the hardest one to get affinity for.
Okay, then I guess I might have overdone it then because I had Barrett in my team.
Barrett in your team during the final battle?
Yeah.
Well, did you get him first though? Was he the one?
I don't
Was he the
remember.
one who saved Cloud's ass first? That's the thing.
I don't. No, he was the last.
Yeah,
character.
because the character who shows up first is the one with the highest affinity rank, and the second one is the one with the second.
Right. Yeah, I was pretty mean to Aerith like during the remake. But okay, mean's putting it.
Well, that's because
harsh.
Tifa's a better girl. I mean, what?
Oh, that's why. And Cloud X Tifa forever. But
I mean, it's the more sensible option.
Well, they did telegraph the affinity the affinity stuff more so than they did in the original, but they also didn't let you do things like, okay, I'm gonna buy the flower from Aerith, but I'm gonna give it to Marlene right in front of Tifa's face. That one.
Well, I mean, wouldn't that be cute though? Like, I feel like a lot of girls would be like, "Oh, he cares about the kid."
Well, that's the thing.
sweet."
That's the thing. Tifa in the original, or at least in the English translation, she's like, "Oh, Cloud, a flower you shouldn't have," and then you're given the prompt to give it to Tifa or give it to Marlene. And giving it to Marlene sounds like the douchey option in the face of that dialogue choice.
In terms of that, yes, you're right. How douchey is Cloud? Because I've noticed a few points where he is kind of douchey, like when Jesse's talking and he's just like, "Shut up."
It's more that you feel this more later in the game, but he's very much compensating.
Oh.
Which they lay on pretty fucking
His
thick,
douchebag moments
like,
are
early
pretty
on.
much him acting cool and it not entirely working out. But
Yeah, because he doesn't know how to act cool, so his idea of acting cool is being a standoffish jerk.
yeah.
Yeah, it's like a lot. Quick, folks are quick to not buy it. I think that's what it is. It's
Oh,
like-
so his Buster Sword isn't as heavy as he thinks it is. Is what you're
It's
saying.
It's actually
it's a
Tatum
little bit
Mission.
like Final Fantasy VIII, where he's a douchebag, but occasionally characters rag on him for it. Because people would do that with Squall all the time. It's one of the reasons I think he's given a bit too much crap as a character. Is they know he's a douchebag. They make fun of it in game. It's part of the point. But with Cloud, the reason his character works here, I feel better than it did in the original, is because since there's so much more time to develop him, we're given a much clearer idea of where the division is between him acting cool and him letting his guard down around Tifa and stuff.
I mean, we'll see it in a scene coming up right here, actually, when he does the Advent Children jumpy
Oh
stuff.
yeah, he does the legitimately cool thing and gets complimented for it, and he can't
help but smile
He can't
about
help
it.
but grin
Yeah,
a
he can't
little.
help but smile about
Yeah,
yeah.
You see that, Mom? You see how cool I am? Yeah.
he can't help but grin at the compliment.
Oh, wait, Mom's dead.
I wonder how many different hair gel streaks he has to do in order to make his hair.
I
look
do like
that.
this moment of contrast between Cloud, though. Cloud's just standing there, cool as a cucumber, and Barrett looks back at him in mid-freak out and then has to look down at his own hand and realize it's shaking. So he's like, okay, you know what? I gotta chill. And
I don't know. The way Cloud opened his eyes in this, like, look, he took a short micro nap.
Cloud, how do you stay so collected in the heat of battle?
I do like
Huh?
I do
What?
like this part being real time. This was it's a transition into a cutscene, yeah, but this whole thing was a cutscene in the original. You would be running automatically through the whole sequence, but they have you run, and then they show Jesse tripping over something right before the cutscene, and then the cutscene happens. That is a brilliant transition.
So here's the moment.
Okay, that was pretty cool.
He can't help himself.
Oh yeah, and that was just the best way to end that. To end the demo. Yes, we are finally at the end of the demo. If you're wondering why we spent this entire part bullshitting, it's because, yeah, this is the demo. We don't need yet another video on YouTube over footage of the demo and people trying to talk about how the combat system works.
Be sure to hit that like button and ring that bell to get all notifications to BrainScratch.
Yeah.
But actually, please hit that like button and hit the bell.
So we'll get into the nitty-gritty of combat mechanics and how exploration works in Part 2 of Final Fantasy VII Remake. In the meantime, we will see you all then. Next time in Part 2. Or you can go watch some other channel and we'll be sad. Yeah. Bye.